Making vehicles that fly through the air is one of the human race's greatest achievements. To someone born 200 years ago, the idea would seem impossible. Even today, building aircraft is such a specialist activity that it takes millions of dollars and the expertise of highly qualified professionals to achieve it. For those reasons, you'd probably imagine that amateurs would stay away from aircraft building. But every plane you're about to see in this video is homemade. The name Wallace WA-116 Agile might not mean anything to you, but perhaps you know this charming little plane better by its nickname. It's commonly referred to as Little Nellie. It's also technically not even a plane. The proper term for it is autogyro, because it has an unpowered rotor. 30 Little Nellie units were built from the 1960s onwards in Great Britain, where they were designed by a man named Ken Wallace. He wasn't an aircraft designer by trade, but he was a very experienced former Royal Air Force wing commander and had flown hundreds of missions in various different types of aircraft. Perhaps the biggest claim to fame this aircraft has is the fact that it's been on screen in a James Bond movie, Flying Through the Sky and You Only Live Twice in 1967. Wallace never made his planes available to the public. He kept most of the models to himself for research and development purposes. What do you get if you take a man who's obsessed with aircraft and give him 14 whole years to build his own idea of the perfect plane? The answer to the question is you'd get Symmetry, the plane that took Corey Bird 15,000 hours to build. Symmetry first flew in 2003 and has been turning heads ever since. You'll never see a plane that looks smoother. The banana yellow exterior doesn't have a bolt or a join visible anywhere. It almost appears to have been formed organically. Reducing drag down to as low a level as possible was Corey's aim when he was designing his plane, and he achieved it by studying the way that sailplanes are built and adapting their design. Symmetry is as dynamic as it is good-looking. It can do 246 knots per hour through the air while consuming 14 gallons per hour of fuel. If you're happy to slow down to 185 knots per hour, fuel consumption drops to 4.5 gallons per hour. The only drawback is that it needs a huge runway. The lack of drag makes taking off and landing a lengthy process. If Gabriel Nderitu never takes to the sky, it won't be for want of trying. The Kenyan has been trying to become the first person from his nation to fly in a homemade plane for years. And despite 14 failed attempts, he's not ready to give up yet. Looking at his ramshackle creation, he must be totally fearless. Gabriel isn't a pilot and has never worked as an engineer. He works in computing. He's taught himself airplane design and patched his plane together with bits and pieces he's been able to scavenge. It's certainly bulky. It weighs over 1,700 tons, and the first attempt to fly it failed because the wheels collapsed. Inside the sheet metal two-seater plane is a Toyota engine, which drives a 6-foot wooden propeller. There are 2 power switches of the kind you'd normally find on the walls of your home, fitted to the plane's dashboard. Everything about it screams, "I'm not going to fly," and we can't help but feel that even if it does get off the ground, it won't stay in the air for very long. At the other end of the expertise scale is David Rose, who has been involved in the field of aviation for more than 4 decades, starting with his time as a pilot in the U.S. Air Force during the Vietnam War. He wanted a small plane of his own for many years, and in 1999 he paid for a partially completed plane called the Mockbuster, which was part of a NASA research project. After putting a team together, David worked tirelessly on the Mockbuster, but concluded that the original design was flawed, and the plane could never fly. Undeterred, he decided to use his own expertise and some parts from the Mockbuster to build a completely new plane. After a year of concentrated computer modeling, number crunching, steel cutting, and welding, they'd achieved their aim. The plane known as Renegade had been born. The small, lightweight plane is built for speed. David intends to use it in races. With a little fine-tuning, it should be capable of reaching 495 miles per hour in the air. Not all stories involving homemade planes are happy ones. Whenever an amateur gets involved in the process of building such dangerous, powerful machines, the risks of disaster increase almost immeasurably. The family of Mark Stoll can tell you all about that. Mark was the creator of a plane known as Lucky Stars, which turned out to be a horribly ironic name. What Mark really loved doing was building experimental aircraft, and Lucky Stars was no exception. It had a distinctive ringtail, which made it easily identifiable in the sky even from long range. Once he'd got the ringtail formation working satisfactorily, he amended the tail once again and decided upon a box shape. This time he wasn't successful with his amendments. The plane made it only 50 feet off the ground before stalling, flipping in the air, and plunging back down to the ground. As the plane was an ultralight, it afforded Stoll almost no protection whatsoever. He was killed instantly. According to previous interviews the Daredevil had given, though, he wouldn't have wanted to go any other way. Today, we associate Henry Ford with the manufacture of cars. Cars weren't the great man's only interest, though. Back in the 1920s, he was just as enthusiastic about planes. He'd already created the Ford Trimotor in 1925 to demonstrate that his company could make planes. When he followed it up with the Ford Flyver, he was trying to create the Model T Ford of the skies. Unfortunately for Henry, the head of his aircraft division, William Bushnell Stout, wanted nothing to do with the proposed plane, and neither did his colleague William Benson Mayo. Ford pressed on with the design anyway and had it built independently. Ford's instruction to the builders was to make a plane that could fit inside his office. He wanted people to be able to store his single-seater planes in their garages. It wasn't to be. The third prototype crashed in 1928, killing its pilot. Ford abandoned plans to make the plane commercially available. Despite that tragedy, 2 homemade replicas are known to have taken to the skies since 1989. When you were a small child, you may have had a Little Tikes Cozy Coupe, which you drove around your yard. You may even have bought one for your own children. If you did, you probably can't think of any vehicle less suited to traveling through the air. But that hasn't stopped people from trying to make it happen. Not only have they tried, they've succeeded, and we've got the footage to prove it. The team of men who made the Flying Tyke mostly did so for their own amusement, and the motor, systems, and wings which were attached to the child's car are completely unique. It took multiple attempts to create and connect wings to the car without having them break away when takeoff was attempted. And even when they got it working, it only flew for less than 30 seconds before crashing back down to the ground. So far, the Flying Cozy Coupe hasn't taken any passengers into the air with it. We think that might be for the best. NASA may have been involved in the creation of the innovative Daedalus human-powered aircraft, but in reality, it's the work of a team of students and professors from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology working together. All NASA did was provide them with access to the Dryden Flight Research Center back in the late 1980s. The name Daedalus comes from Greek myth, in which Daedalus was a man who built his own wax and feather wings to escape from King Minos. Without a human occupant, a Daedalus aircraft weighs a mere 70 pounds. That's because they're made from carbon fiber tubes and airfoil, coupled with polystyrene foam on the edges. In 1988, the Daedalus set the record for the longest flight ever undertaken by an aircraft powered by a human when it covered 72 miles in just under 4 hours, flying from Crete to Santorini. Olympic cyclist Kanelos Kanellopoulos was in the pilot's seat as one of the very few people who possessed the endurance to keep the plane in the air for long enough to make it. The Cree is a plane that looks too small to be able to fly. Also known as the Cricket, it's an early 1970s design from Michael Colombon, a French engineer. For 40 years, it's held the title of being the smallest twin-engine manned plane in the world. Although it's a homemade plane, you won't be able to make your own copy of it. Kits aren't available. Every version of the Cry has been made from specific plans. Wider than it is long, with a 16-foot wingspan, but only 13 feet of length, the Cricket is a remarkably lightweight plane. It comes in at only 172 pounds, lighter than most people. It's also fast for a homemade plane, with a top speed of 130 miles per hour, and is cleared to fly to 12,000 feet. Even though the Cricket has been around for years, it's still a permanent work in progress. In the last few years, we've seen an all-electric version of the Cricket built, as well as a full-sized remote control model. Are you bored with your daily commute? If so, perhaps you should take a leaf out of the book of Czech pilot František Hadrava and build yourself a plane to beat the morning rush. Hadrava had grown tired of his 14-minute daily drive, and so he started putting his spare time to good use building Vampira, which is loosely based on a series of American light planes known as Mini-Max. The open cockpit means you're a little exposed to the wind, but with a build cost of less than $5,000, one can't expect luxuries. The building of the plane has been a complete success, and he now flies Vampira to work every morning. He believes that if he flew in a straight line, it would take him less than 4 minutes. But as he sets off early in the morning, he avoids passing over residential houses because he doesn't want to wake people up. That costs him around 3 minutes. But he's still cut his commute in half. And of course, he has his own private plane. Building a plane is an impressive achievement for anybody of any age. When the feat is achieved by teenagers, though, it feels all the more remarkable. How do they have the life experience and knowledge to put a working plane together? To be fair, it took a lot of them to do it. 20 teenagers worked together to build Sling 4, which was made in Cape Town, South Africa, and has seating for 4 people. Impressively, it took them a mere 4 days to complete the task. It must have been a little terrifying for them to take their untested aircraft into the sky, but they had no need to worry. The plane was robust and airworthy, and made the trip from Cape Town to Cairo in Egypt without any difficulties. The pilot, Megan Werner, was only 17 years old at the time of the flight. She's the founder of a charity called You Dream, which seeks to inspire young people to explore their full potential. We think it's fair to say she's leading by example. It's common for people to want to make a grand entrance to their wedding. A limousine is a frequent choice of transport, as is a horse-drawn carriage. It's less common for people to want to turn up by plane, and even less common than that for people to want to arrive in a plane they've designed themselves. That was the ultimate dream for self-confessed aviation geek Asmelash Zeferu in 2015, though. The Ethiopian plane builder had always dreamed of flying himself to his own wedding, and so he built the K-570 rickety-looking aircraft, if we ever saw one, to do the job. There are 2 issues with this tale, though. The first is that Asmelash had never flown a plane before. The second is that he'd never built a plane before either. That didn't bother him one little bit. He'd seen all the YouTube tutorial videos he needed to see, and he believed he was up to the task. The big day arrived, and all of Asmelash's friends held their breath as he got aboard the plane. Would it take off? Actually, no, it didn't. The propeller disintegrated instantly. At least nobody got hurt, and he got married anyway. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!